The fried liver attack is the most popular chess opening variation on amateur level. It's been around for so long that I begin to think that the fried liver dish was named after it. And historically it's been considered that white is easily winning. Later, black found ways to complicate matters significantly, and some people even started to believe that actually black can take over here. But nowadays we're going to see a very interesting game where both sides used engine and played basically a perfect chess game so that we can figure out the ultimate truth about the fried liver attack. Alright, let's start from the very beginning. The fried liver attack arises from the Italian game, again, the most played chess opening. And here after knight of 6, white has this move knight to g5, attacking the pawn on f7. The main move by black is pawn to d5, and now after the trade, there's a very common mistake by black, just to this natural recapture on d5. And here there's this move knight takes f7 known as the fried liver attack, because you're supposedly frying your opponent really quickly right after that. And after king takes, you play queen f3 and you're like, okay, you're smoked. But it turns out to be a lot more complicated than that. Now, this game was played by email. Certainly not the most common way of playing chess nowadays, but nevertheless, on the other hand, we have a perfect chess game, so to say, because obviously they both used computers and they had plenty of time to think and to combine computing power with human understanding so that we can see the ultimate truth. And my bold promise here is that you will understand the fried liver attack better than 99% of your opponents. Okay, actually I'm a grandmaster, but I got to learn a lot from this game and from the analysis which I'm making here for you. So here after king to f3, what can black do? Their king is in check, therefore they definitely need to do something about that. Retreating back is just a bad idea. Retreating back to g8 leads to this instant checkmate basically on the next move. So that is totally a disaster. Getting back to e8 is not much better because after bishop to d5, we have this threat of queen to f7 checkmate. And also we're putting pressure to this knight on c6. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the most played move by black is knight to d4, trying to counterattack something, but it blunders basically a scholar's checkmate. At this point, you may be thinking, okay, Igor, it's all clear, white is winning, right? Not really, because black's got this bold move king to e6, where the black king really embodies that approach if you want it done right, doing yourself. And yes, the king is terribly exposed, but on the other hand, at least black holds on to his extra knight on d5. And now white needs to prove that they have something for the knight that they sacrificed back there on f7, because if not, black is going to complete his development and will probably win the game thanks to their extra knight. Now, how can white continue his attack right here? Well, the first move is pretty clear. This king is exposed, this knight on d5 is pinned, and therefore white goes knight c3, adding more pressure to the pinned knight. Now, what can black do here? Well, white simply wants to take it and to keep attacking. Black definitely needs to defend this knight somehow, and there are only two ways of how this can be done. They can move their knight either forward to defend it this way or backward. Back in the day, people were not sure which move is better. A lot of players, even grandmasters, played knight e7 just to guard the knight this way, but later people realized that it's not a good move because yes, it does defend the knight, but it's passive. It also blocks out the bishop, blocks the queen, so it's not really a good thing to do. Knight b4 also guards the knight, but simultaneously counterattacks, and therefore it's much better. Now, here this knight to c2 threat would possibly fork the king and rook. So therefore, white also needs to be a little bit careful about that. But the easiest way to solve this problem and not to waste time defending is just to castle. This way, white gets the king out of a potential check from c2, and therefore knight to c2 is just a really bad thing. It just leaves this knight on d5 unprotected, so white grabs it and keeps attacking. So white kind of solved the problem of this pawn and also played a useful move anyway. But now black also got some time so that he can play c6 and ultimately protect this knight on d5. Therefore they say, you know what, I'm definitely up a piece in this game, and now you need to prove that you have something and that you can checkmate my king. And white says, alright, challenge accepted, and goes pawn d4. A great move. There's the black king right here. Want to open up the e-file and start attacking it. And for that reason, taking this pawn on d4 is probably just way too dangerous. White's going to move the rook right here and start attacking straight away. It's going to be too bad for black. Now, beginners at this position often take this pawn on c2. But the issue with this move is black is just horsing around way too much, while he's totally undeveloped and his king is centralized. This should not be a good strategy. And white don't even have to worry about this rook, because their position is so strong, they can keep attacking, they can take on e5 just to clear this file, and then once black captures the rook, go rook d1, and now black is totally overloaded and overpinned in every possible direction. On the next move, white is going to take right here, get to the king, and probably checkmate it quickly. Nevertheless, there is a move which allows black to fight back, and it follows the old rule: when you're up material, trade pieces. Black goes queen f6, bringing the queen into play and offering white to trade queens. White certainly does not want to do that. White wants to checkmate the black's exposed king. Therefore, white goes queen e2 to dodge the exchange, and at the same time to create this pin along the e-file so that you can possibly take on e5 sometime in the future. Now, this once again makes it very critical for black, because now there is this pin. There is always this annoying pin, which used to be there before, from the bishop. Now you're putting pressure to the central pawn on e5, and because of the pin you can't even play something like f4 and then just grab this pawn on the next turn. You can play a3 and kick out this knight, which doesn't have any good squares to go to. The black king is exposed. It looks like black's position is going to fall apart, but once again there is a precise move which allows black to keep fighting, and that is a move king to e7. Now, the move which is really hard to play, because black basically keeps the king in the center of the board across the white queen and blocks out this bishop from f8. And nevertheless, it is a brilliant move which really makes it very challenging for white to continue the attack. So what is the point of this move? Well, mainly, like just wanting to get out of this pin from the white bishop. Now, this allows black also possibly to trade knights. And again, if you're ahead of material, if you wish to slow down your opponent's attack, you want to trade off material. So black possibly can trade off knights on the next turn. And also it opens up the bishop so that black can't develop. Now, of course, the downside of this move is that the pawn on e5 is no longer defended, and white can happily grab it and attack the queen. The queen goes to g6 and also even creates some threats along the way, plus black still wants to trade off knights. White can solve all of these problems by advancing the knight to e4. This shuts down this diagonal so that black queen can no longer take this pawn, and of course white is ready to generate new threats, such as bishop g5 check or maybe knight to d6, stuff like that. So black counters once again, this time with the move bishop f5, attacking the knight. What can white do? Well, white guards the knight. Should black take here on e4? Not really, because in this case white would obviously recapture, and now the knight from d5 has to go, plus white opened up this really juicy file for his rook, and black doesn't want either of that. Therefore black needs to play something different. In order to find the good move for black, they need to use prophylactic thinking and actually ask themselves, what is white going to play here? And white's most natural move here would be to play pawn a3 or maybe pawn to c3 and to kick away this knight, because it doesn't have any good squares to go to. Black would probably have to retreat somewhere back to a6 where the knight is totally passive. Plus, if white wants to, white can just take and disrupt black's pawn structure. Realizing that, black makes the move knight to b6, which fulfills two functions. First off, it provides this escape square for the other knight. In case white tries to chase away this knight, it can easily retreat. Plus, black still wants to trade off material, maybe this bishop on c4, and therefore white just retreated it back to b3. Now, black avoided all immediate troubles, but still there is this lack of harmony. His king is centralized, he can't develop the bishop, therefore he can't bring rooks into play, and black needs to find some plan to sort out all these things. And at this point, black plays another brilliant move. This king is kind of like, you guys are all useless, why do I have to solve all the problems myself, and goes king to d7. Very counterintuitive move, just putting the king along this open file, seemingly vulnerable, but it's a great idea, because after rook to d1 check, the king just hides to c7. And finally the king found quite a safe spot right here, plus this time the black is ready to develop the bishop, develop the rook, and say, hey, you know what, I'm just up a piece and you got nothing. And this time, it makes it critical for white, because this time white needs to prove that he can keep his attack going, or else black will gain the upper hand. And so white comes up with this pawn sacrifice, pawn a6. Black can take this pawn, theoretically, but he shouldn't, and he didn't, because if the pawn is captured, then white can realize the main idea of the sacrifice, bring the bishop out right here with a check to the black king. Notice that this file is controlled by the rook, therefore black's got only one square to go to, but then after knight to d6, white has way too many threats and white is winning. Now, since black understands the reason why white sacrificed this pawn on e6, he wants to bring the bishop out and check the king. Black got the king out of danger in advance. This time this pawn on e6 is indeed in danger, and white goes knight d6, mainly to protect this pawn from e6 so that black can't easily capture it. However, this way black can at least trade off his passive bishop and bring the rook into play. This time he's still putting some pressure down the e-file and maybe is ready to take this pawn somewhere in the future. Here white found an interesting way to continue the attack, which obviously demonstrates how different computers can think about chess. From human perspective, definitely white would wish to develop this bishop somewhere here or here, and then bring the rook into play along the d file or e file, something like this. But white played queen d2, which looks like it just blocks this bishop on its original square, but on the other hand, white gains a tempo attacking the knight and potentially is creating a battery along the d file. Anyways, right now black needs to get the knight out of danger, so he retreated, and after c4, the knight is attacked once again. An interesting thing about this game is that you can see how both sides try to attack with every move that they play and create certain threats. Now black goes knight to f6, and this time the pawn on e6 is hanging, and white says, you want the pawn? Go ahead, take it. Goes pawn to e7, kind of insisting that black should indeed take this pawn, but of course it's just a bait, because the pawn cannot be taken. In this case, rook to d8 becomes possible, because there is no rook on e8, which would cover the square, and then on the next move is just a checkmate. Which means that black can take this pawn, plus he still needs to guard this square d8, or else the white rook will enter the square. Therefore, black played knight to d7. To cover up his king, and then queen a5. Quite a mysterious move. In general, when attacking, you wish to move forward to opponent's side of the board, but in this particular case, it's not exactly clear what is white trying to achieve. Anyway, he revealed this on the next turn, like capture this pawn on e7, and white goes bishop f4. Now, for a second, it still feels like white's attack may not be enough, because, you know, black is still up a piece, this bishop on b3 is passive, and black can either try to do something like rook e2 and all of a sudden counterattack, but of course white has prepared something. I'll give you a couple seconds in case you can find it on your own. And white says, you know what, I just start first. So white plays rook to c6 check, and then finishes the game queen to c7, right before black had some time to do the same to white. Now we know what the white threat is. Together with the bishop, this queen wants to get to the c7 square and checkmate black. Therefore, black goes b6 to stop this and to attack the white queen. Queen goes forward to a6, checking the king. Ideally, black would wish to keep his king somewhere here, but he can't do this because of the white bishop x-raying this diagonal, and therefore black has to keep his king in the middle of the board. It looks dangerous, but at least black has a lot of defenders surrounding the king, therefore it's definitely not easy for white to checkmate the king. And white plays another great move, pawn to c5. It opens up the bishop, which previously was totally passive, and puts some more pressure onto black. Now black can take the pawn with the knight because it's pinned down to the king, and therefore white is putting pressure, bringing the bishop into play, and again, it's interesting to see what can black do here. Black calmly, once again, plays king to e8. It's quite impressive that in the middle of this intense battle, black managed to make like an absolutely unbelievable maneuver of his king, going all the way around and returning back to the home square, and somehow his position is still fairly decent. White captured the pawn on c6, and it's interesting that black cannot easily recapture back. By the way, let this be a little puzzle of the day for you. How do you play here as white? Please think about this, and if you can find a move which gives white a winning advantage, please write it down in comments below. Black in the game played rook to d8, bringing the last piece into play, and black actually completed his development, even though in a very unusual fashion. Now white trades on b6, and then goes bishop d6, hitting the rook. By the way, notice once again, at every turn, whenever possible, both white and black tries to attack and play forcing moves, meaning checks, captures, or attacking moves. And that's what you should also be looking at while playing a game. Anyways, white wants to kick this rook out, because if the rook moves somewhere out of danger, there will always be this direct attack against the king, and black is done. So black can't do that. But instead, what saves black is a counterattack. Black goes bishop h3, threatening mate on g2, which forces white to retreat all the way back to f1 just to guard this pawn, and now black goes rook e3. Again, he needs to keep the rook on this e-file so that white can bring his own rook right here and to deliver this check. White plays bishop g3, which eliminates the pin, and therefore the bishop on h3 is now in danger. White is ready to capture it. Guess what black does? They counterattack the white rook, and white does the same. Rook c3 counterattacks the black rook. By the way, it's not an offer of an exchange. It's actually quite a tricky move, because if black were to take here expecting white to recapture, instead there is rook e1. That's why white wanted to kick the black rook out of this file, because if the king moves, that is basically a checkmate on the next move. This means black has to do something else about his rook, and he retreated back to e7 to keep covering his king, but white keeps attacking, and this time the black rook ran out of squares. All these squares are under the control of white's pieces one way or the other, and therefore black is going to lose the exchange. He played rook to e6, but now white can win the exchange. This, however, opens up the other rook of black, and now the white bishop on d6 is attacked, so he retreated it back. Anyway, white managed to get back some material, and now he keeps attacking, but the material balance is also good for white. Black goes queen g5. Frankly, I don't understand this move. I don't know. Anyways, like did something, rook e1, attacks the bishop and pins it. Black goes king f7 to solidify his position. White doubles up, and now the bishop is still attacked, therefore black retreated it back. Now there's another interesting moment. Most players would probably move this rook to e7 delivering check, but in reality it only helps black to move his king to a safer square. Therefore white doesn't play this move and instead goes queen to a6, threatening this little pawn on a7. But it's not only a pawn, because if you imagine white capturing it, that would also attack the knight and generally speaking put a lot more pressure onto black. So in this critical situation, what does black do? It's very important to train yourself to not immediately think about defense, but to always ask yourself, can I counterattack? Black goes knight d5, countering the white rook. Now, what do you think white would do? The same. Rook e5 is a counterattack to black's counterattack, and black counterattacks to white's counterattack to the counterattack. Like, you got the point. White defends the pawn. This time, finally, the pawn on a7 is in real danger. Black plays this awkward move rook a8 to defend it, but at least the pawn is safe now. And surprisingly, black is still holding. White was trying to push through for this many moves and still couldn't get a winning advantage. White goes a4. This time, he wants to play a5, and somewhat all these pieces are a little bit loose. White wants to attack them. Black goes bishop c6, and after a5, it looks for a second like black is just done. If the knight moves, that would expose the bishop. But once again, black saves the day using a counter blow. Knight b4, threatens the queen. Ironically, the queen doesn't have many good squares to go to, because all these squares are controlled by black's minor pieces, one way or the other. So white retreated all the way back to f1. And now after knight going to d5, black regrouped, and he's still doing fine. Nevertheless, after queen c4, white is making this strange dance of the queen. It's really a dancing queen, and although black is doing fine, but all these pieces are a little bit loose and the king is still exposed. Black played king g8 trying to hide the king, and now rook e7. There is no immediate threat, but nevertheless from here the rook certainly puts some pressure onto black's position, generally speaking, and black can't take it because the knight is pinned. Black plays rook f8, also bringing his rook into play, and white played h3. An interesting prophylactic move, but couldn't find a way to break through immediately, and so he just plays this useful move to provide an escape square for his king in case some checks along this diagonal down the line. Black goes rook f7 trying to get rid of the white rook, and here white played an absolutely mind-boggling combo. Now, definitely from the human perspective, you just think about trading rooks possibly, right, or doing something like that, or just doing nothing because black has no serious threats, but white just sacrificed the rook this way. It's a sacrifice because black controls this square. And after the trade, rook checked, there's the rook to f8, and it's unclear what white tried to achieve by giving up the exchange. But here, there comes a move which definitely shows you the difference between computers and humans. There is this bishop to e1, an absolutely crazy geometry of the chess game. The rook from e8, although it's almost traded, but right now temporarily it still guards this bishop on e1, making this move possible. And from e1, the bishop attacks the queen and x-rays the knight. Again, absolutely mind-boggling. I'm not even sure if any human would find this. Maybe some creative genius like Firouzja or locked and loaded Neiman, but I don't know. It's really out of this world. Anyways, black goes queen d1, pitting the bishop, so that the bishop cannot easily take this knight. And now the rook on e8 needs to make a decision to take or not to take. If you've been following this channel for some time, you know that to take is a mistake, right? White knows this as well, and he goes queen e4, maintaining the pressure and creating a threat of queen e6 check, which would push the king to the corner, and black will lose the rook after that. So black goes g6, countering this threat. Now queen e6 check is harmless because the king can move right here. And white just plays king h2, getting the king out of this pin so that bishop takes b4 threat becomes real. Black tries to retreat, but after queen e6 check, finally white managed to get something tangible. The king needs to move, but now queen takes c6, grabs this juicy knight, and once the dust settles, white is up 2 pawns in an endgame. White goes queen d4, possibly hoping for some little counter tricks, but bishop g3 just keeps everything under control. Black still goes knight f4, offering the trade, saying, hey, do you want to trade? But definitely white does not want that. In this case, there would be endless checks to the white king. Now, in an endgame, the main winning plan is just to push your passed pawns forward, and white did that by playing pawn to b4, which is a little tactical trick. At first it looks like black can capture this pawn, but not really, because in this case queen e5 would come with a double attack to this king and the knight, therefore black would lose one more knight, which is way too much for black. In the game instead black played g5, protecting this knight on f4, but now the pawn sneaks to b5, and now these two passed pawns are really dangerous. I can move them forward at any moment. The black king is also exposed, but I can always play queen e7 and attack all around right here, and black just resigned. All in all, the fried liver attack does work, but I gotta say it was fried really slowly. Now, if you want to know how you can counter the fried liver attack yourself, check out this video where I've covered some unknown way where you turn things around and you become an attacker. It's not the Trackster, it's not the Russo Gambit. Check this out, you'll be amazed.